Hello, hello, Liberation Hour. This is your host, Comrade Felicity, coming at you pre-recorded, or not pre-recorded, live in the studio. I don't know. I've gotten so used to saying pre-recorded now that every time I do this, I just want to say pre-recorded, but I am actually live in the studio. I don't have my camera as it is currently in storage, but no matter, we will continue. Everyone, welcome to the last ever. God. Welcome to the last episode of the Liberation Hour. Woo! Guys, we've made it. I am so incredibly happy to be here. It's bittersweet because the Liberation Hour has been my baby. It has been my creative outlet, and I am so incredibly, excited to move on. But it sucks because I really have grown to love this show and what we were doing here. And so, let's go ahead. For the last time, top of the hour disclaimer, WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign online community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not meant to represent WRFU UCIMC. Folks, welcome back. Yes. So as many of you know, might have been hinted at in some of my last shows or anything. I am moving. I'm actually graduating college. Woohoo! And I'm moving out of state. And so, the WRFU, obviously I will no longer be able to host my show here. And so I think this is a very good conclusion and a very good way to say goodbye and hello. I have had such good experiences doing this. I've always kind of been the content consumer, but I've never really been the content creator. And so to be able to put together this show, to be able to have a creative outlet like this, I can understand why so many love it and why so many turn to this as their chosen medium. And I feel the same. This has been such a wonderful experience. And honestly, it wouldn't be what it is without my loyal viewership and listenership who have tuned in every week to listen. I thank you so much for your support. I know we're small, but we're tiny and mighty, and we have, we have things to say. And as staunch Marxist-Leninists, I view these things as incredibly important. And so, thank you all for listening. And I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time. As you all know, usually I take the first 30 minutes of the show to cover the news, and then the last 30 minutes I do my pre-recorded segment with guests. And you can find the full pre-recorded segment as per usual on my YouTube channel, Communist Bananas. I'm changing things up a little bit because I think it's important to have a proper farewell, a proper hello, a proper introduction for the new projects that are coming into play. And also, I have a couple things that I want to address that I feel like are kind of perfect to address here in this format. So first of all, once again, thank you all for your support of the show. I will actually be moving to, not too far off, I will be moving to the Red Phoenix News Network, which is actually the audiovisual arm of the Red Phoenix. This is if you don't know, the newspaper of the American Party of Labor, the official newspaper. This has been in the works for a minute. It's something that I've been thinking about for quite a while. And we've been going through a lot of proposals, and finally we are here. And it has been approved by the Secretariat and approved by the Info Bureau. And so we are currently in the basically the getting ready stage of launching the Red Phoenix News Network at the end of May, beginning of June-ish. You're going to see a lot more communications about that from the APL Red Phoenix Instagram and other such sites. So go ahead and stay tuned for that if you want more information. But that's where I'm going to actually be moving. I'm going to be a live anchor with the Red Phoenix News Network. I will be co-hosting with my comrade Maurice. I want to say a big shout out to comrade Maurice. He has been instrumental in making the Liberation Hour what it is today, and instrumental in launching the Red Phoenix News Network and making it happen. So big thank you to Maurice and his help, and of course comrade June, who is the head of the Info Bureau and one of the most wonderful people to work with. She has been so incredibly supportive of the Liberation Hour and of the Red Phoenix News Network, and I'm so excited to do this with both of them and the rest of our comrades. The Red Phoenix News Network is a way, I think, for comrades to have an outlet within the party to express themselves creatively and do news in another way. I think the written word is incredibly important in how we do the news, but I also really think that audiovisual is that new frontier and is this way for us to really get on the map and even more than we already are. And so, taking the articles that we have and putting them into audiovisual format and making new content is going to be the name of the game here. And so I will be a live anchor, and then we will also have on-the-ground reporters who will be doing their own shows, and as well as reporting. And so, this is a super exciting new adventure for us. And I think that it was so incredibly fun to do the Liberation Hour, but I'm ready for something a little more serious and more dedicated to party work. As you all know, I'm a dedicated anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist, and I'm a candidate member of the American Party of Labor. I have been a member for about a year now, and I have nothing but respect for my comrades. I have nothing but respect for my party, and I think that as a revolutionary communist, being part of a party is one of the most important aspects of what we do. And so, uplifting the party and by extension, uplifting the masses. This is what we should be doing all the time. This is our duty as a Vanguard party, or one that is growing into a Vanguard party, I should say. And so, we are. This episode actually that I'm releasing, this pre-recorded segment, is actually on the Vanguard. It is with almost everybody from the Secretariat, and they had such amazing things to say. I had a wonderful time interviewing them, and I think that doing party work it's so fulfilling. You're working with your comrades towards a brighter future, a better day. And you're doing that, with like-minded people who understand the mission and the movement. And I have to say, the American Party of Labor, we are focused on the movement. We are focused on the mission. And it is why the Red Phoenix News Network is where I'm going next, because this is where I need to be. And you might be wondering, what's going to happen with Comrade Felicity's personal channel? What's going to happen with my channel? Well, if you didn't notice before, the channel that I've been posting the Liberation Hour on is my personal channel, and it was the channel that I was posting my student films on beforehand. I will still be posting personal projects and things that I do, but don't expect a lot from me there, because my main priority right now is getting my life set up and everything as a young professional, but also being a good party member and ensuring that I'm putting as much time as I possibly can into the Red Phoenix News Network as it's in its infancy right now. And so you won't really see a lot of me on my personal channel. I might release projects here and there over the next few years, but I'm really more focused with that channel, honestly, on doing personal art. I do a lot of research films. I love filmmaking. I would like to continue to do that. But that, comes with the understanding that party work for me comes first, at least at this point in my life. And so you won't see a lot of me on that personal channel. We are going to be migrating the Liberation Hour, the entire playlist, over to the Red Phoenix News Network channel, which is also, you can find the handle at Red Phoenix News. And so I'm actually not going to be keeping the Liberation Hour playlist on that channel. I'm going to be moving it over. So, in the next few months, if you see some changes happening, that's where it's going to be. I'm going to do as much promotion as I can to direct people in that direction for those who want to go back and listen to new episodes, or who are experiencing the show for the first time. So expect that to be happening. There's a lot of changes happening, but I would say good changes. And I'm really excited for the future. While things look really grim on the world stage, imperialism is, rearing its ugly head, and we have a lot to fight for. And, the working class as we know it, there is no strong vanguard movement yet. And that's the key word here, is yet. Because, as Marx said, we have a world to win. The working class, all we have to do, all we have to lose is our chains. Now is the time. I think that it's, now is the time to be dedicating ourselves more than ever to the workers' movement and ensuring that workers' revolution is a possibility. Nothing is off the table at this point. We have a world to win, and I'm excited to do my part, not only as an anchor and as a creator and part of the Red Phoenix News Network, but as a part of the party and doing on the ground organizing. That means within my region, organizing tenants, organizing workers, organizing debt unions, getting people mobilized, getting people educated. This is a multifaceted project that you're not going to find one specific way that it's all going to work. In order for us to more fully reach the masses, we have to go through multiple mediums, and we have to be willing to, flex and understand that where people are at might not be where people need to be in order to get the workers' movement off the ground. But that doesn't mean people can't get there. And I think that it's great that we can do educationals and get people there in more ways than one. And so that is the plan. That's what we're going to be doing. It's a big step. It's a big change, but I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more excited, and I couldn't be more grateful to the American Party of Labor and to WRFU 104.5 FM. You guys, everyone who has given me the ability and the platform to do what we do, to do what I do and be creative, thank you. You are forever, ever in my good graces. And with that, the reason I'm not covering the news this time around for this segment is I wanted to do a good closeout and have a proper goodbye and hello. But I also have been noticing a trend within the online leftist movement more broadly, but also with those who call themselves communists. And I'm only addressing this here because I think that this is something that should be addressed, should be understood, should be acted upon, as with any other revisionist tendency. And I'm not trying, I think something that I part of what made me a little nervous about talking about this until now is the only way I can really explain it is the way that a lot of people really love to accuse other leftists who are giving criticism as calling us purity testers. The criticism I'm about to give to the online left and the online communist community is not out of spite or cynicism or any of these things. The critique I'm giving is out of love for the masses and the movement, and the fact that being a committed Marxist-Leninist communist means that, and I should say anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist, is that you have to have those uncomfortable conversations whether you like them or not. And it's not purity testing to be uncomfortable by being called out on a tendency that might be harmful. What I'm talking about here is the tendency within the online left to essentially grift the movement and become a big enough creator and a big enough platform that you no longer experience being a proletarian, and by that metric, you no longer really advocate for workers' revolution. What do I mean by this? I'm going to point out specific creators and content creators who do this, but I'm not talking only about them, and I want that to be clear. I am not specifically addressing only these people. I'm simply addressing the people who exist within this class online, who, and I should say in person, who have carved out a really nice little spot for themselves online with a nice viewership and solid Patreon supporters, and people and a good income and living, who no longer experience wage work, specifically. This is a big one here. And are quite, I should say, opportunistic in their rhetoric and their language and their theory. These people that I'm talking about, and I have talked about these people before, are Hassan Piker, FD Signifier, to an extent, Bad Empanada, Socialism for All, and other similar creators. Now, why am I calling out these people specifically? Well, one thing is most of the people on this list have a huge following, the biggest of which being Hassan Piker's millions of followers and fans. Now, as many of you know, Hassan Piker has been under a lot of quote-unquote fire recently from the Democratic Party. And I'm not critiquing him on the lines that he is quote-unquote too leftist. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. Part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because there has been a big trend recently, a big upsurge of interest in revolutionary politics and socialism. People like Hassan Piker do not understand socialism, and oftentimes use the terms, the terms of dialectical materialism, socialism, invoke the names of Stalin, Mao, Lenin, Marx. They use these terms as ways to catch people's attention and then feed them information which it might not be fully wrong, but is actually very harmful to the movement. Hassan Piker, FD Signifier, specifically, both of these people, I would say stand distinct from people like Bad and Banada and Socialism for All. All of these, again, are online leftist content creators, because these are two people who specifically uphold the Democratic Party in some way, shape, or form. If it isn't by endorsing a candidate, it is also by engaging critically, or I shouldn't say critically because it's not critical. They are engaging and giving credence to the politics of liberals who are funded by the same capitalist class that also funds the Republican Party, also known as the American Fascist Party. I am specifically calling these people out because these people make exorbitant amounts of money, and I'm once again talking about FD and Hassan Piker, while essentially saying nothing. We can talk all day about how capitalism is a terrible system and how it's exploitative and how the working class must rise up and mobilize. But if you are continuing to push Democratic Party names as some kind of solution to that, then you are aiding and abetting the bourgeois class. It's not purity testing to point out that this is a losing strategy, and it always has been. This is textbook opportunism. This is trying to do textbook entryism. The support of Democratic candidates like Graham Plattner, like Zoran Mamdani, who have run in the Democratic Party and represent the Democratic Party, represent the bourgeois class. It doesn't matter what they've tweeted. It doesn't matter what they've said on Reddit. If these people are running as Democrats, if these people are running within a structure, a superstructure, which ultimately serves capital, is paid for by capital, then these people are not working class candidates. Hassan Piker really likes to invoke people like Lenin and Marx to help support his arguments. And he does this because he has an audience of people who he does not actually push to do theoretical reading. He does not push to learn more about the leftist movement and the leftist cause. And he does not push actual working class movements and working class leaders who are organizing on the ground. He does not interview these people. He does not give them a platform. In fact, this has become more apparent in the recent years of his popularity, as he has essentially become a celebrity. Anybody who is invited to the Oscars is not on your side. He read a piece from Lenin, or a quote from Lenin, in order to back up his claims about supporting Graham Plattner. Not only is that a bad, terrible, terrible way to quote Lenin, it's wrong. Lenin never, ever, ever, ever told us that we need to, in fact, he warned against this multiple times. He never said that we should support candidates who are running in bourgeois parties because they say they represent the working class, because those people are running for a seat for a bourgeois party that is paid for and owned by the bourgeois class. What Lenin did say is that if we are to run in bourgeois elections, that it must be explicitly for the working class. It must be explicitly revolutionary politics. And should you be able to get elected, you should do everything you can in that position as a revolutionary elected official to help support the workers' revolution. This is not Graham Plattner. This is not Zoran Mamdani. These people are not revolutionary communists, and they are not part of revolutionary communist organizations. And we need to stop acting as though this is going to change anything. I don't care if it's Ilhan Omar. I don't care if it's AOC. I don't care if it's Rashida Tlaib. I don't care if it's Bernie Sanders. All of these people are still part of the same apparatus. They are still part of the same party. And I know there's going to be people who are going to nitpick me and say, oh, well, Bernie Sanders, he's actually an independent. And he is still bought and paid for in one way or another by the same elites, because he does not do anything meaningful when the time comes. He is still a Zionist. And all of the momentum that he got in 2016 and in 2020 that he could have taken to an actual revolutionary party, or taken that energy and siphoned it into something more productive, he gave it right back to the Democrats. That should tell you all you need to know. All of it. As it pertains to FD Signifier, for those who are incredibly online, like myself, you have probably seen a lot of discourse happening between him and the creator I mentioned, Bad and Banada. I don't particularly like any of these people. I don't also know any of these people, and I don't plan to. I'm no fan of Bad Empanada, but unfortunately in this situation, I find myself having to agree with him on his take about FD Signifier, which sucks because, as I said, I grew up consuming this content. I'm pointing all of these people out and I'm pointing all of this internet drama out because it's important to recognize within people who have big platforms in the leftist space. FD Signifier has for a long time treaded a thin line between being a revolutionary actor within the space and also conforming to what it requires to become a wealthy online creator. I think that as much respect as I have for a lot of his work, and as much as he has personally, I should say, affected me with his work, as I found him when I was only a teenager in high school, I levy this criticism against him because I find it incredibly telling that instead of rebuffing Bad Empanada on the merits of his arguments, he instead chose to stoop as low as say he looks like a meth head. Not only is that incredibly offensive and wrong, that is unbecoming of a person who calls themselves a socialist in any way, shape, or form. I'm incredibly disappointed in especially his actions as it pertains to liberal Zionism and the concept of Jewish supremacy as a characteristic of Zionism, and his inability to critique other creators. And I'm going to say it because he has an American-centric worldview and views that as himself being a black creator, I don't think he views himself as someone who should be critiqued. That his perspective is in some way, shape, or form more informed than another person's because of his experience. I'm not saying that his experience as a black man in America is not relevant and that it is not important to understand, but it is not the only experience. And to claim to understand the experience of Palestinians and then turn around and say that, or to claim to support what's going on in Palestine and the Palestinians, and then to turn around and support openly liberal Zionist talking points from someone who he has mentioned in the past he is quite close with, smaller creator Little Bill. That is incredibly hard to watch and see. And this is getting at a larger tendency, I think, that I'm going to get at in just a second. The last two people I want to discuss today are Bad Empanada and Socialism for All. These two people are a bit smaller than Hassan Piker and FD Signifier. I would say Socialism for All being the smallest one here, although both of these people have their own issues when it comes to the online left. Bad Empanada is openly very aggressive, and I think it's hard to sometimes take his arguments seriously because more often than not what he ends up doing is alienating people with his sour tone and inability to have any real discussion, because he comes off as very insulting a lot of the time. That doesn't make me disagree with him on a lot of his specific points and evidence. I don't think that's the problem. In fact, I really respect his scrutiny and his ability to scrutinize sources, and look at people's arguments on the merits of their sources and their evidence and their arguments. I don't think any of that's bad. What I scrutinize, and I should say what I'm very critical of with him, is the fact that not only does he not openly support Marxism-Leninism, even though that's literally basically what he supports, I would say. I honestly would call him more of a Maoist third worldist, which I have plenty of problems with. But I'm going to be real, he's just mean and rude, and it's hard to take him seriously sometimes. I don't think that's really as big of a criticism as the others, but it's something I wanted to mention because it is something I think that can be improved upon for better, I would say, getting people to take the message. But I digress. The last person I want to talk about, Socialism for All, I also really respect his content, and I think he does great work. Although, five years in, Socialism for All, I don't know this person. Again, I don't know any of these people. I do not intend to. We do not have any personal connection. These are simply my observations as someone on the outside who has, for the most part, only really consumed these people's content. This is my first time ever actually being a quote-unquote creator. Openly tells people, even 5 years into his journey as a Marxist-Leninist, to in some way go to Green Party events, to, quote, find other people who have like-minded ideas in revolutionary politics. This is non-tenable. The Green Party are an eco-fascist organization, and in many ways are simply the Democratic Party if they were more environmentally conscious. The Green Party are not an answer to our problems here. They are a bourgeois party. Would say I'm quite disappointed in his support in some way of the Green Party. I know he says he doesn't support them, but plugging them as a party to go and join or not even join, but fraternize with, when there are actually revolutionary working class parties like the APL, who he has acknowledged as a revolutionary working class party who at least has well-read cadre. And I should say that people within leadership have reached out to him to discuss, and he chooses not to respond. And this comes back to my greater problem here, my greater issue with these tendencies. At what point do you center yourself or do you center the movement? At what point, especially when this becomes a career for some people, do you have to start centering yourself as the brand to make the revenue needed to survive? And at what point does are the masses put on the back burner for you in order to make that money? To be a content creator, to be a YouTuber, is to be petite bourgeois. You are no longer a proletariat. You are no longer working class. You are no longer, your relationship to wage labor is no longer that of a proletariat. This is incredibly important to understand, because a lot of these online content creators are people who have at least a little bit of influence over the large audiences who watch them consistently. And when they put out ideas on, for example, supporting Democratic Party entryism because, this is all we have right now, this only moves the working class further and further and further away from what we really need to be doing, which is organizing people, getting people disciplined, and getting people militant towards a workers' revolution to turn into a workers' republic. We are never going to get there by supporting the Democratic Party. We are never going to get there by supporting influencers and online quote-unquote communist content creators who are basically being paid to tell you to not do revolution. And they can say all they want that, I don't say this because I could get demonetized. That's kind of the point here, man. At what point does it become about you? At what point does it stop becoming about the masses? I had a realization in the middle of making the Liberation Hour when I was trying to decide where I wanted to go with the show, because I knew it was going to have to end at some point. And I began to realize something pretty profound, at least for myself, that while I completely understand what content creation can bring to you as a person, as a creative, when it comes to the movement and the masses, you have to decenter yourself, and you have to start centering what's best for the collective. If you are a person who makes online content and that's all you do, you're not an activist. You're just a creator. You're just a content creator. And if you're someone who makes money off of that, and you tell people to advocate for leftist revolution or for leftist values, and you still don't show up to things IRL, you still don't support actual working class movements, parties, organizations, unions, you're just a grifter. Nothing more, nothing less. I think someone to look at who I don't fully ideologically align with him, but I think that he does this quite well, and I've talked about him prior, is Cinemarxism. He is a streamer who also does a lot of tenant work within Kansas City Tenants Union, and is, I would say, someone who we should really be looking at to see how we can balance this. It's one thing, I understand making your living off of content creation. This is something that Cinemarxism does. But the thing is that this is not his... Being an online content creator for him is one avenue towards greater revolution. He does organize. He does put himself on the line. I've heard FD Signifier in the past because, again, I was once a big, big fan of him. I have heard him say, well, I'm not going to go out there. That's for some of y'all. No. When it comes to being on those streets, That's for all of us. There are people in my party who are parents, who are grandparents, who are physically disabled. There are people who work 2 jobs, who have kids to feed, once again, who have things in their life that make it really, really, really hard to organize, and yet they're still doing it. There is no excuse. There is no reason not to. And if by some crazy chance any of these people are listening to this, understand, I'm not trying to make an enemy out of you. I'm trying desperately for us to understand, for you to understand, that centering yourself in this movement, whether you mean to or not, is only hurting those of us who are actually workers. I really appreciate everybody listening, making time to hear what we have to say. I hope that we see you over on the Red Phoenix News Network. I promise I won't be discussing influencers after that. This is something I wanted to get off my chest because I feel like it's important, and I care about this movement a lot. I put a lot of time and energy, of course, into this movement, and I simply want better. Better, fewer, but better. And with that, I present to you guys the last episode, the last pre-recorded segment with the Secretariat on the Vanguard. I thank you once again for your viewership, your listenership, and I'll see y'all later. Bye. Okay, everybody, welcome to the 42nd episode of Liberation Hour. This is the last one. This is bittersweet, I think. It's been such a fun run since I want to say July is when I started this. So we've come a long way. I'm here joined by members of the Secretariat of the American Party of Labor, and we have a great episode planned for you guys. I think that this is a great way to close out the Liberation Hour and move into our next projects, because of how many wonderful followers that we've gained from this and people who are genuinely interested in hearing what we have to say. So, thank you to all of those who have been listening since day one or not. We appreciate your support so much. And I'm joined here today by the Secretariat, as I said before, and some familiar faces, some unfamiliar. We're going to go ahead and start with some introductions so everybody's familiar with who's going to be talking today. Camilo, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having us all. And I was about to start off by singing, "Hey, hey, the gang's all here." Or at least some of the gang, not everybody, but most of the gang. And I think this is the first time we've ever done something like this where we actually have almost the whole party leadership speaking publicly.
Right.
But hi, I'm Camilo Lasso. I'm the national chair of APL. And I've been with APL since about 2010. And I've been in the position of national chair since 2016, I believe.
Wonderful. All right.
What's up, everybody? I'm Maurice Brunson. I am the Deputy Info Bureau Director of the APL. I'm also the Deputy Editor of the Red Phoenix, which is the APL's newspaper. And I think I've been with the party since maybe mid to late 2021, 2020, early 2022, sometime around there. So a couple years now. And yeah, it's pretty much the main political party I've been with at this point. And yeah.
Cool. Hey, I'm Isabel. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Deputy Org Bureau Director for the APL. So I deal with a lot of membership stuff for us, and some organizational strategy type of work. I've been in the APL 5 years. I just had my 5-year party anniversary a couple days ago.
Woo!
So yeah, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of Red Youth Rising, a youth organization, a socialist youth organization that a lot of us in the APL are working on.
Yes, we are. Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Isabel.
Hey, I'm Sebastian Lemba. I'm the org bureau director of the APL. I've been a member of the APL since I want to say at least 2014, maybe 2013. He, him. Yeah, and I've been org bureau director for the past couple of years.
Awesome. And our last but not least, Mr. Victor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Victor Vaughn. I'm the National Secretary of the APL. I also run the Espresso Stalinist website. As National Secretary, I'm the head ideological guy. Anytime you got a question about our beliefs, you can speak to me about it. If you ever have any ideological questions, I'm the person. I am a founding member of the APL, actually, so I've been here since 2008.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's so cool.
Actually, I think Victor's the only surviving founding member from the original group, aren't you?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, welcome everybody to the show, those who have been on and those who haven't. It's so great to have everybody here once again. We have a list of questions that the wonderful Maurice has put together for us. Thank you, Maurice. And I'm not going to go in complete order, but I am going to be asking all of these questions, so they should be available to everybody in the chat that Maurice sent. So I'm going to start, I think, with question number 3, because I think that this is a great way to get us started on the conversation of the APL, what makes us so distinct and unique, and why people should support the party. So how is the APL distinct from the US, from other US Marxist or socialist parties and organizations? And we can go by the order that you did introductions, but if one person wants to give a more comprehensive answer, then that's totally cool.
Well, I think there's, if I may, I think there's 2 ways to answer. Well, probably multiple ways, but 2 ways pop into my mind immediately. And one of those ways I could answer, and another one of those ways Victor could answer, meaning how are we distinct practically, and how are we distinct ideologically? So I'll have a crack.
Yes.
Practically, we're distinct because we are, I want to say, the only uh, uh, self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist party that actually wants to build independent workers' power.
Right.
With independent workers' power based on class consciousness, not supporting the Democrats, not engaging in what I like to call is alderman on parade. Sometimes you'll go to an event and the first speakers are the local city fathers, as it were. No, we are about building independent, class conscious, proletarian.
And yeah, just to jump right on the points there that Camilo laid down. I think the APL we are distinct from other parties, definitely not only because of our priority on independence of our action, but additionally because we have a true sense of, I guess, real mobility in terms of how our party operates.
Right.
In a very practical sense, I've been through I mean, I never was an official member of other parties, but you kind of are around and people try to recruit you, and everything sounds very bureaucratic in other parties, and you meet people that have been in the same position for decades, and it's almost like another job. In the party here, it's really a matter of who applies themselves, which one of our members, and all of our members are very capable, and all of our members are leaders in their own right. But which members, are able to put in that extra time, have the capacity, have the certain experiences and skill set, and the certain leadership skills and experiences that will be able to, help us not only develop as a party as a whole, but in all of our parties' working groups and all of our parties' different sectors, I guess, sections. We are able to grow in a really organic way that I feel like other parties can't, because they have this kind of calcification. Pieces don't move. People stay very stagnant. They're almost afraid of change. This party, we're not afraid of change. I would say we like to welcome change, and revolution is change. So I feel like that just goes right in hand with our ideological stances as well.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, kind of like building on that. I think our kind of culture that we have internally, sounds like a corporation, but everybody really makes the party their own project. Like, we are all part of a very young uh, developing revolutionary movement, and being part of an organization that's new and fresh and growing means that everybody who's joining uh, is also building the organization. So you're not joining something that's already very ossified or has a very rigid set path that you have to be following line by line, exactly what to do, even if that strategy is bad. Everybody's building this on their own. Everybody's working on projects and developing the organization as they gain practical experience. So not only when people join do they grow as an organizer, their growth is also the growth of the organization as a whole. All of that collective experience is sending us forward tangibly every single time we have someone do something cool, which is very often.
We have a lot of cool people. All right, Sebastian.
Yeah, I think that what makes us distinct from other organizations in the US is that we haven't made any compromises to class enemies or backwardness, which I see a lot these days. We are, I think I'm fair in saying that we are the direct continuity of the like anti-imperialist class struggle in the US. We accept followers, but we're trying to build leadership with a strategic vision that's informed by Marx, Lenin, Engels, and Stalin.
Absolutely. And Victor.
Well, for me, a big part of what sets us apart and a big part of our motivation in founding the party in the first place was that there was no Marxist-Leninist party in the USA that was free of revisionist trends. So I would say a big thing that sets us apart is our complete rejection of revisionist trends, especially Soviet revisionism, that's Khrushchevism, Brezhnevism, and then also Dengist capitalism, that is modern China, and then also our rejection of Maoism as a revisionist trend. And I would say a big tendency among these other parties is to chase trends a little too much. They don't tend to see Marxism Leninism as a complete and coherent science that can be applied to different conditions. They see it as something to be sort of endlessly updated to chase whatever political trend is happening there. So I think we set ourselves apart in not tailing the masses. And we have been very principled in our opposition to tailing reformist movements or electoralism, things like that. And we have been completely committed to building a vanguard along the Leninist lines, which has also mostly been abandoned by these other U.S. parties.
Right.
We set ourselves apart, I think, from those who treat China as socialist today, who support any kind of market socialist type ideas, and particularly those who substitute just flashy activism for real party building.
Right. Yeah. It seems, and this is something, a trend that I've actually seen that I have been harping on like for like months now, I feel, about online leftists and their tendency to center a lot of their content around themselves, but also around revisionist tendencies and what's the most quote unquote popular amongst Marxist circles, without actually doing any of the real legwork to research it and understand it more thoroughly. Like as you said, the support for China and Dungism and just the general like non-thinking that goes around that, because if you consider it for more than 5 seconds, you're like, oh, wait a second, maybe not. Maybe China isn't actually all that. But a lot of online Marxists right now just cannot seem to grasp that for some reason.
I also
You know
would
what?
say, oh, sorry, go for it.
No, you go ahead, Isabel.
I would also say that Victor mentioned like tailing the masses. There's a lot of emphasis in the US left, I guess you could say, on showiness of our like numbers or something like that. Like,
Right.
you know, a lot of focus on metrics on online, or how many people are showing up to your rallies or your protests. That focus on like popularity, I guess, of how many people can you draw out to an event, or how many like likes can you get on a Instagram post or something like that. And
Absolutely.
for the APL, I don't think that has ever been something that we've cared all that much about. Obviously, we want to have successful events and get our message out there. Um, but our strategy of what we actually do in our day-to-day is more about talking to people in our communities, getting your neighbors engaged in politics, and they're getting educated on their class position, raising class consciousness, organizing your workplace, go get coffee with the person who you work with and talk
Yeah.
about your boss,
Yeah.
is something that we would much rather have, everybody who is part of this organization or wants to be part of this organization, working on those things, like actually impacting your local community, the people around you, the working class in your area, more so than just endlessly chasing
Clout.
like a very big event
Yeah.
or like a really good Instagram reel or something like that. Although obviously those things are pretty important too. Just overall our strategy is less about like um endless rallies and protests and TikToks and
Right.
more about organizing workplaces and apartment buildings and actually impacting our local working class, because that's how
Yeah.
you draw people in. There's a Nobody's going to become a Marxist by hearing people talk about like the kind of ideological debates between like Stalin and Trotsky.
Yeah.
But people will become Marxists if they see that the Marxists are showing up and they're the ones who are like organizing a tenant union or installing accessible infrastructure in places where the city government has failed, or distributing direct aid to people. Those things are what win people over in a very material way, where they also want to be engaged in doing those things, um, more so than a YouTube video or even a protest. So that's I think that's something that's different for us.
Yeah, no, APL is certainly very much about that action. It's very much about like, being there materially, in more ways than one. And I think that online content has its place. Obviously, we have this, but that's the thing, is it has its place. It's not everything. And I would say the direct antithesis to us is the dreaded ACP, who like their entire line is trying to get like content creators. Like that's their whole thing, is like, how much content can you make for the ACP? So it's like, very, that we have a lot of other American parties who just honestly don't understand Marxism as for what it actually is. And it's obvious because that's their goal. And so, yeah, with that, moving on to
Well, hold on, before we go,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
circle back for one thing.
yeah.
But I think there's another thing that makes us distinct that a lot of people don't even really realize, even some of our own members don't realize, and that's that of all the larger, and I'm including us among them, larger groups in the US left, because of course you'll occasionally see, a new Communist Workers' Party started.
Mm-hmm.
They're on Instagram and they have a flag, but they don't have a program or a platform. So leaving that aside, but among the larger groups, we are the only one that did not start off life as a splinter group off another as a result of a split. Like um, uh, Workers'
Really?
World was a splinter off of Socialist Workers' Party. PSL was a splinter off of Workers' World. Um, or the I don't think they're even still around anymore. The late unlamented PCUSA, a splinter group off of CPUSA.
Mm-hmm.
We are the only group that started off essentially as a group of people, a group of communists some of us coming from other organizations, who decided, you know what, no one's doing it, we're going to do it. And decided
Right.
to build a communist party from the ground up, starting from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been an uphill struggle, of course, every step of the way. We didn't have the benefit of some of the groups that started off as splits because I don't want to specifically name names. But one group that started that was a split off a larger group. Well, when that split happened, one of the people who joined the split, they brought printing equipment with them. They brought all these resources with them. We didn't have any of that.
Right.
Everything that we have achieved, everything that brought us to where we are now, we built it on the basis of blood, sweat, and tears and hard work.
Right. No, exactly. And Victor, since you're a founding member, did you want to speak more on that?
Actually, yes, that was the impression at the time. Um, when it came to the founding, we did realize that we were starting completely organically. Um, it really just started as a loose confederation of individuals who ran into each other from different social circles and looked around and decided that there wasn't an anti-revisionist party in the USA, and if we didn't found one, then one would simply not exist. The
Right.
closest thing at the time were people like RCP USA, which at least was marginally pro Stalin, but also have a cult around their chairman and also follow Maoist revisionism to a rather large degree.
Hmm.
Um, and then aside from that, there were groups like PSL and WWP, which were either Trotskyist in orientation or Brezhnevite in orientation, or affiliated with, geopolitically with Russian and Chinese interests, and also pursuing a kind of reformist line internally when it came to union organizing,
Right.
things like that. So we looked around and we decided that, well, if we didn't take action, no one else was going to. So it really started with just people getting into contact and then deciding to meet up in person.
Hmm.
This was back before even leftism online was even big. Back then, because again, this would have been about 2007 or so. So internet activism and social media weren't even that huge back then. And really, the discourse was very limited on socialism. These days, you've got like even social democrats, AOC, and Bernie at least being part of the discourse. Back then, even that wasn't available or talked about. Even someone, even people like Bad Empanada or Hassan Piker wouldn't have been dreamed of back then. Like no one was talking about socialism, communism, not even a severely distorted version.
Right.
So I can't stress enough how underground the roots of this organization originally are.
Yeah, no, and forgive me if I'm wrong. Was Bill Bland a founding member?
No, Bland is an enormous ideological inspiration for us.
Okay.
The works of Bill Bland had big impact upon our original founding members, including myself, um, as well as Alliance Marxist Leninist, which was kind of a descendant of Bland's work. Um, and actually, Camilo was actually involved in Alliance during its heyday, and he ended up in APL precisely because of that, because Alliance's work and Bland's work had enormous impact on what would become the early APL.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was unfamiliar. I've found Bill Bland, but I didn't know much about him at the time.
Yeah, I was with Alliance ML, and Alliance ML started basically as kind of a coming together of uh, two people and the people who were around them. So on the
Right.
one hand, you had Jack Schulman here in the U.S., and I was kind of connected with Jack, and you had Bill Bland in the UK, and a dear comrade of ours, Harry Kumar, was connected with Bill Bland, and so that formed Alliance Marxist-Leninist. And I remember back in the very, very early days, and you gotta understand, this was long. The internet was not what it was. What it is, rather, was the internet then is not what it became. So we had kind of heard in Alliance ML that there was some people who were talking about forming an American Party of Labor. So who are these people? Can we find out about them? And of course, like I said, the internet was a far different place then, and we sort of got a vague idea, but nothing beyond that. And then some years later, lo and behold, I met Victor, and here I am.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, it's so funny to hear about the party's founding in 2007. I was literally 3 years old. Like, I was alive when that happened. It's so
Oh,
strange.
for God's sakes, please don't say that, please.
I'm sure Isabel and Maurice were probably around my age as well. Um, so yeah, that's such an interesting like yeah, like I think that APL is so unique, and that's what makes it so such a good party to, back, because of how our unique founding, but also our differences with other socialist or so-called socialist parties in the United States. And so the next question I want to pose to the Secretariat here is, what separates a communist, a Marxist-Leninist, from a run-of-the-mill activist or organizer? So Camilo, you want to answer that first?
Well, I could just point blank say a knowledge of theory,
Right.
but that needs to be elaborated, because people always talk about theory this, theory that. A knowledge of a class consciousness and a knowledge of the nature of power.
Right.
What I mean by that is an understanding of how the capitalist system works, how it functions. And by understanding how it functions, you see the cracks in the system. And by understanding that, have the basis, at least the foundations of how to, of a strategy, of how to operate in oppositional and revolutionary way. So I would say that what separates the Marxist-Leninists is that that understanding, that consciousness, which of course only comes through an understanding of theory. But theory as tested in the fire, that's what makes us.
Right. Anybody else want to add on to that?
Yeah, I'll jump right in real quick. Mostly though, Carmen Camilo stole what I was going to say. Stole my lines. I think with Marxist Leninists, we it's not just, I mean, our theory does have our specific theoreticians, like we named earlier, Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, but it's that our specific theory gives us lessons to learn from and specific strategies and tactics that have been proven in history. We're not like grabbing like whatever just seems like it works, whatever seems nice. We have the benefit of millions of adherents to Marxism Leninism that have practiced and fought, and we're able to take what they've done and put it in the contemporary. And a lot of other organizers or activists are kind of just doing what feels right, echoing what Comrades Isabella and Victor said earlier, tailing the masses, just doing what people like to hear, what people want to see, but not necessarily giving people a revolutionary program to organize towards. There's never a goal. It's just organizing for the sake of it.
Right, right, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, being able to learn. I think myself, before I would consider myself a Marxist-Leninist, I was engaged in some like community organizations and I guess you could say like activist work.
Right.
That I felt very lost in doing. I wasn't sure what was gonna happen next, or really like had an image in mind of like where to send my like organizing effort towards, or what to grow towards. Where Marxism, Leninism, like the theory of Marxism, Leninism, and the experience of the socialist projects that have been successful gives you something to like work towards to achieve, and a program and a platform of a Marxist-Leninist party also gives you something very tangible to organize around.
Right.
And the study of the theory lets you see basically exactly what you're doing wrong and almost exactly what you should do. It's very common when you have some organizational experience, like some practical experience, to read some of what Lenin was writing about, and have people in mind who you organize with who are the figures Lenin's talking about, which is very satisfying and also gives you some at least things to chew on to apply in your actual practical organizing. So it also makes it, to be quite honest, a little bit frustrating to see a lot of the mistakes that organizations and individuals make repeatedly in their practical organizing that like
Right.
Lenin was calling people out about. It's a little frustrating. It's like, well, if people would study Marxism, Leninism, we could be avoiding a lot of these traps that people fall into of organizing mistakes, strategic mistakes that we already know don't work. We've got handbooks on what to do, basically, that are just being ignored by anybody who's trying to do any sort of practical work who isn't a Marxist-Leninist. So that's my answer to that question. I guess another call for people to read theory,
Period.
which it can't be said enough.
No, it can't. It can't. Thank you, Isabel. That was such a good answer. Sebastian.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly going to be echoing Camilo here. Actually, basically everyone. But strategy is a big part of it. Understanding how to wage the class war, understanding what that entails, what avenues of struggles there are to have, having a vision of the dictatorship of the proletariat, understanding to get there we need to have a genuine understanding of the Vanguard Party, what it means to be self-sacrificing, having discipline, self-denial, putting the movement, putting the strategic positioning of the proletariat ahead of your oneself, and then also understanding how to bring into alignment workers and their organizations towards liberation from exploitative classes and systems and imperialism. I think these are mostly words, and I can elaborate on any one of them. but really understanding these things, taking the time. If the key words that I'm saying just point people in the right direction, great. But yeah, having that, and that's, a party. A party is the manifestation of all of those things, and that's what we're doing.
Period. Yeah, that is. Thank you, Sebastian. Victor, do you have anything you want to add?
I'll start with the easy answer, I suppose. What differentiates a communist activist from a run-of-the-mill activist is the ideology, the class standpoint, the class analysis, and the strategy that entails, which others have already touched upon. But I do think that a lot of activists focus on issues in of themselves rather than seeing them as part of a larger system. Things like anti-war, housing, or rights, things like that. Whereas a Marxist activist is capable of looking at something like the genocide in Gaza and drawing and being able to see who's behind that by looking at the economic interest. For example, the most terroristic and most fascistic leaning elements of monopoly capital in the USA and Israel are the forces mainly driving behind this war and the current war with Iran. And I think that a Marxist-Leninist standpoint lets you see clearly that, whereas to a lot of activists or liberal activists, things like that just seem to come from the sky like a plague, and there's just nothing that we can do about it, and we don't know why it happens or anything like that. So I think it's that clarity that sets us apart, which does affect your strategy, because we see this as a total system rooted in class exploitation, and that's the source of a lot of these problems we're looking to solve. Problems like poverty, exploitation, imperialism, everything that we're looking to solve through socialist revolution.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that that's a very good way to look at it. You know, it's like liberals are like, must have been the wind. All of this imperialism must have been the wind. It can't be connected to anything bigger. Yeah, no, wonderful answers. And I think the natural progression, the next question I really want to ask, but I also want to give my 2 cents before everybody else answers, is how do I know when I've read enough theory? Read enough is in quotes. And I think I really love the way that you pose this question, Maurice, because I think a lot of budding Marxists tend to, and I fell into this trap myself, of thinking there's a threshold that if you've read all of the things, then that must mean that you are now a Marxist. That's not necessarily true. You know, I'm a big believer in the learning never stops. You should always be reading. Um, Something that I tell a lot of new people who are interested in the theory side of things and getting into like the ideological side, um, I tell them, you know, you're not going to get it on the first try. You might understand certain concepts. There might be things that are familiar to you, but you have to go in understanding that you're going to need to read multiple times to be able to fully grasp the information, because a lot of these people, like Marx, for example, literally spent their entire lives studying and researching and writing about this. So to expect yourself to put so many expectations on oneself to say, I must understand this immediately, and check all the boxes, and now I am officially a Marxist Leninist. That's not how it works. But yeah, how do other people feel about that, Camilo?
Oh, you just hit on something major, I think, which kind of goes back to what distinguishes the Marxist-Leninist. So, to answer your question, your hypothetical question. So, when do I know I've read enough theory? Never. The answer is never. Because Marxism-Leninism is a science,
The immortal science.
and science does not stop. Science is always exploring, always experimenting, always taking in new developments, always looking at new situations, always testing out new theories. Does this theory work? Does it not? What aspects of it are useful? What's not? Well, there's a reason why a synonym for Marxism-Leninism is scientific socialism. Our approach, here's another thing that separates Marxist-Leninist. Our approach is scientific. Our approach is logical. Our approach is not based on emotionalism or feelings or I want to show the world what a good person I am. No, no, no. Our approach is dispassionate, analytical, critical, logical. There was a wonderful movie that came out in the early 60s, which if folks haven't seen it, I highly encourage, called Failsafe. And it came out at the same time as Dr. Strangelove, and it was basically the same story, yet told from two totally different perspectives. Dr. Strangelove told this story of an accidental nuclear war on the basis of satire. Failsafe told it on the basis of a tragedy. And there was this one scene in the film where Walter Matthau plays a Cold War scientist, you know, the type that spends their time doing calculations on how we can all survive a nuclear war, right?
Right.
But there's this one scene in the film where he's arguing with an American general, and the general is basically saying, "Oh, well, we could reach out to the Soviets, we could explain it." And Matthau cuts him off and says, General, you don't understand these people. These people are Marxist fanatics. They don't think the way you and I do. They're not motivated by fear or jealousy or passion. They're human calculators, is what they are. They
It's so funny.
assess a situation, weigh the options, weigh the odds, and then make their move. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I'm sure that was meant as an insult. We'll take. But yeah,
Yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah, hidden as an insult. There was the truth there. Yes, the Marxist-Leninists approach politics not on the basis of moralism or emotions or feelings, but on the basis of logic and scientific analysis.
Yes, absolutely. Maurice, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just with a few words. Again, I gotta hide my notes better or something because Camilo's stealing on my lines here. But yeah, I don't think it's ever enough.
I'm taking
And
a peek at your paper.
I knew it. I knew it. You should know better too because you're an educator. That's not right. But I think Camilo hit it on the head with the never. Comrades in the party know me to pull up a lot of quotes. So right now I can only think of two quotes that echo Camilo's point. One is Stalin's quote is to say to one of his sons, Yakov. His daughter says that this conversation happened. He's basically in the dacha one day studying. He's 70 at this point, and Yakov is basically saying that he doesn't understand something and he doesn't want to learn anymore. And he's only a man in his 20s or 30s. And Stalin has a stack of books next to him and he taps them and he says, I'm 70 years old, but still I keep on learning. And I think, Stalin was a lifelong Marxist-Leninist. So that to me is just the mentality of a seasoned revolutionary. There's always a country you don't know about. There's always a revolution you don't know about, a piece of history, a historical figure. There's always something that is ready to explore. The world's too vast for one human to absorb all of the rich culture and experience that we have. And the second little anecdote is also Stalin, but it's to harp on Camilo's point about realism and the kind of the practical nature of what we do based on looking at material conditions. Stalin's quoted to say to Churchill something along the lines of, experience has taught me to deal with conditions as they are and to not get caught up in how I wish things were. And this is during the Second World War. And again, I think quotes like that really exemplify, one, a seasoned Marxist-Leninist in the first, but also in the second, a seasoned Marxist-Leninist in a time of severe crisis, who is still telling somebody, even in this time of severe crisis, I keep my composure and all I can do is deal with situations as they come in front of me. And I think Marxist-Leninists, especially in the time of climate crisis and these regional wars, these inter-imperialist conflicts, this is the time that the composure and the seasoned poise of a Marxist-Leninist and a Marxist-Leninist party is needed in these divisive times, these decisive times.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, kind of a different angle on this question, but I hear this from people a lot who feel like they haven't read enough theory to be able to practice. So I get asked a lot, like, can I write an article about literally any issue, like a local union struggle,
Right.
if I haven't read Capital by Karl Marx?
The
And
answer is yes.
The answer to that question is always yes. There's no you can't take a mechanical approach to this. It's not a step-by-step of you have to read these things first before you can do something. You should be doing both all the time. So there's no threshold of like you have to read X amount of theory before you can do Y practical action. You should be reading because it's going to inform your practical action and make it more successful. But if you just simply can't get through chapter 3 of volume 1 of Capital, that shouldn't prevent you from, interviewing a union member or trying to organize a workplace or whatever practical action is in front of you that you are capable of doing. So don't let your long reading list be a hindrance to your practical activity. But also, you can never read enough theory. That's very true.
No, exactly. And something I wanted to hit on again with my response before we get to Sebastian and Victor is don't put too much pressure on yourself to have to understand it immediately. Like, I have to say, it can be hard sometimes to understand what Lenin's talking about. Like, especially from someone who I was afraid of reading theory for so long because I have probably some undiagnosed learning disabilities and I had problems in school, and it can be really challenging to, have to, jump in feet first and just give it a try because they use a lot of big words, like it can be really difficult, but the thing about it is it's meant to be something that you chip away at. You're not going to immediately understand it. It's something, like I said, these people spent their lives studying these topics. They didn't come out of the womb, reciting capital. Marx didn't come out of the womb understanding all of the ins and outs of capitalism. So be patient with yourself. But Sebastian, what did you have to say about this?
Yeah. I think Isabel put that best. I think prioritizing. Well, I think obviously you have to do the reading, right? But like, don't let your lack of exposure to Marxist-Leninist theory paralyze you into inactivity. I think that's important to start with, is having that understanding. But to basically piggyback off of everyone else, also the answer to how to know if you've read enough, you don't, you never read enough. But I will say some pointers. You get better the more you read, but you also have to reread. There's stuff that I read when I was in my teenage years. I'm in my late 30s now. That I'm reading again, and my understanding of that stuff and the value of that stuff at the time was lost on me. Um,
Right.
and I think as I've read them 2, 3, 4, in some cases like almost 45 times, um, I have a much more informed sort of frame of mind when I enter into a new reading. And the last thing I'll say on reading is, don't read alone. Find people who understand the work, or even if it's like tenuous, having something to bounce ideas off of, someone to bounce ideas off of, is a good thing, even if they're not like themselves experts. But also don't, to be fair, uh, don't get yourself caught up in their confidence on something. Always be skeptical, always be critical. Don't be a robot about anything. Really, really read the stuff and digest it. And I think the bigger your reading group is, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, a little anecdote. I know Comrade Keegan and I were talking. I think we were in a group. I think we were with Isabel or something. And Keegan was talking about how he and Comrade Lawrence over in Chicago were having a conversation, and they had a disagreement. And Keegan was under the impression, I forget exactly what the topic was, but he was under the impression that the topic they were discussing was not an important part of Marxism, and he was wrong, and he admitted that. And Lawrence was like, no, here's what I read. And like, that's an important part, is discourse.
Yeah, there have definitely been cases where I'll be in the middle of reading something. Like, I remember reading Foundations of Lenin. I'm sorry, not Foundations of Leninism. State and Revolution. And I remember reading Lenin's part on democracy and understanding the nature of liberal democracy, and understanding that the dictatorship of the proletariat is an expansion of democracy, but it's also an absence of democracy in
Mm-hmm.
a way that is not a conversation about concessions. But like rereading that, I would say like 5 years ago. Yeah, at this point I've read State and Revolution dozens of times, and I just you never think that like something you feel like you're an expert on is going to like surprise you. But I remember reading that, and then for the first time, like, oh, that's what he would
Yeah.
and I remember pausing the entire reading group just to like have like
Have a
an
moment.
anime style monologue about about what was going through my head at that time. Yeah.
I love that. No, and that's really cool to hear from you, Sebastian, because you've been at the party for so long and you've been so active, and you are so, like, you are very much an expert. So, always remaining humble and understanding that, like, there's just gonna be shit that sometimes you come back to it on the dozenth time and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. It's so important to, recognize that within yourself. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it felt like when Lenin was saying, like, I know it's hard for some people to imagine a world without democracy. What he meant was like this kind of democracy.
Right.
Uh, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, he's talking to me. And I just
You
got it.
specifically.
Yeah, me specifically.
Yeah, but Victor, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, others have already answered the main question in spirit, which is when do you know if you've read enough theory? Of course, you never stop learning, so you never, in the sense, finish reading theory. But for me, one of the things I look for uh, when doing educationals isn't so much ticking boxes in terms of readings done, like has this person read this, that, or another, because obviously someone could read something like Capital and not fully grasp it. The real question I look for is, can the person wield their Marxism? In other words, it's not about rote memorization. It's about, do they understand how to think this way and analyze things this way? Can they apply that to new situations and new circumstances? And that's really uh, what I look for. Can they explain and defend the fundamentals of Marxism Leninism? Can they identify different definitions and trends, and most importantly, can they actually use this to analyze their current situation and the situation of the people around them and figure out what to do about it? Can
Right.
they apply theory to concrete conditions, especially in the United States? Uh, Once you can do those things at a basic level, then I think you have enough to act. And then action will expose what you need to study.
Right. And to add on to that, I think can they handle and can they you know, move with criticism? I think a lot of Marxists, not a lot, but there are Marxists out there who, they want to think that they have it all down, and there's always going to be something that you're kind of weak on, or that maybe you misunderstood, or that people disagree with you about. And can you gracefully take that and understand that maybe you're not always right, you know?
Well, that goes back to what Sebastian said. Um,
Right.
don't read alone. Read as part of a group. Bounce these ideas off each other. Discuss them. Again, Marxism-Leninism is a science. Science does not exist in a vacuum. This idea that we have of, the lone inventor sitting in his basement laboratory, the world laughed at me, but I'm going to show them, that's a fictional trope. Scientists are always analyzing, reading, discussing, experimenting, going to conferences, sharing the ideas. Oh, what results did you get? Oh, I got these results. Oh, wait a minute, let's pull it together. Maybe we'll have a different outcome. That's the process. That's the
Right.
process. And again, goes back to the idea of Marxism-Leninism as a science. And as like any science, it's a community effort of gathering knowledge, experience, and then putting that knowledge experience into real world practice.
Yeah, I think that's a very great way to close out that question. And I really appreciate everybody's answer to that because, reading again can be scary. I think a lot of younger Marxists who are just now getting into the theory and everything, it can look like looking at how giant the first volume of Capital is, it's terrifying because you're like, I have to read that? Really? But when you think about it from a more educational, like an educational standpoint. When you're learning math, you don't go straight into calculus. You start with the basics of arithmetic. And Capital, what I really recommend for people to do, especially with Capital, is, bite-sized chunks. Really try to understand the basics of what he's talking about. And also, don't put too much pressure on yourself to have to immediately understand it. You're probably not going to, and that's okay. That's kind of the point. These are very complex topics that, people are still actively, building on today. So don't feel pressured to have to immediately, be the smartest person in the room. Um, but yeah, so moving to the next question here, I think this is a pretty natural flow into this one. Number 7. What are the most important lessons of the 20th century revolutions that the movement needs to reckon with today for success? I think this is a really great question, Maurice. And to give my own answer first, I think there's a lot of movements that we can look at and we can learn from. I would say, obviously, the biggest one is probably the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. But I would say another one that Americans should especially learn from is the Black Panther Party. And in addition to that, a lot of the action that has been taken by imperialist governments to quash those. So, Camilo, start us out. What do you think?
Well, I think everyone's going to have a slightly different answer, and all of them are right. None of them are wrong. All of them are right. But for me, I think the biggest takeaway lesson, and it's one that really speaks to the situation that the US left finds itself in, is we should never, ever, ever surrender our critical faculties. And what I mean is, if you look at the experience of the international communist movement, and there were reasons for this, and I'm not necessarily criticizing them for this, but they kind of fell into the habit of just rubber stamping everything the Soviet Union said. Oh, the Soviets came up with this position. Okay, that's it. We're gonna endorse that. Oh, the Soviets took this line. Okay, yep, we're gonna follow that. Yep, that's the correct way. And all is, I suppose, all was well and fine when Lenin and Stalin were at the helm, but they got into that habit, and now Khrushchev's in charge.
Right.
And they got into that habit of uncritical acceptance. And now Khrushchev's in charge, and the entire world communist movement is derailed.
Yep.
And people in the U.S. left, not all, but a substantial number, the CPUSA just followed that because they'd gotten into the habit of just not being critical. And to my mind, there is nothing more alien to the spirit of Marxism-Leninism than not being critical. I mean,
Yes.
after all, our founder was the man who said for a ruthless criticism of everything in existence.
Yep.
And for me, when the world communist movement got into that habit of just uncritical acceptance, there was a seed destruction there. So for me, the biggest lesson is never surrender our critical faculties. And if we believe, and there's ways to do this correctly, there's a difference between comradely criticism and wreckerism. But if we believe that a comrade or a fraternal party, a sister party is going down the wrong path, the thing isn't to just say, oh yeah, they must know what they're doing. Or the opposite end, you're wrong. No. The thing to do is, well, comrades, we're a little concerned about these positions. Let's talk it out. Let's discuss.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. Especially, I think that's why revisionist trends are so often followed. Because I think a lot of Marxists tend to feel like if you don't uncritically back, so-called actually existing socialism, then you're a wrecker, or you're not supporting the movement well enough. And it's like, okay, but uncritically supporting any project that calls itself socialist is not necessarily a good idea. But yeah, Maurice, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this has been kind of a difficult question for me just because there's so many things that come to mind. I guess with especially the conditions in the US and just the United States historically speaking being very racialized. Sorry, my cat is scratching, but
It's okay.
a cat the country being very racially divided, segregation, Jim Crow, chattel slavery, and then the other racial ethnic conflicts and discrimination that's present and has been present. I just look back to the Soviet Union and always like to remember myself, and I harp with comrades, that it was a multiracial, multinational, like multi-ethnic, true union of working class people. And people like to brush it off, and I feel like a lot of that is just being uninformed or misinformed. But and also maybe just referring to it as Soviet Russia makes people think of the Great Russians or the White Russians, the more traditionally quote European looking folks. But the to me, one of the biggest successes in a historical proportions for the Soviet Union is that they were able to break through tribalism. They were able to break through feudal vestiges. They were able to break through the century-long national conflicts, blood feuds, effectively. There's a painting I love of Sergei Kirov. Um, there's like this armed conflict between the Ingush and I forgot what other ethnic group. My apologies, but there's these two national groups in Russia during the Civil War, and Kirov stands in between them and kind of ends that feud that's been going on for centuries. But those kind of successes and that kind of ability to really make a class solidarity and proletarian internationalism in a real sense, to me, is something that a lot of people overlook. They like to say like, oh, there's all these republics, and we like to talk about the Union, the Soviet Union, the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics, but I feel like it's become almost like a catchword or a phrase, and not really. We haven't really reckoned, especially today, where we're so divided with the rise of narrow nationalism, chauvinism around the world, just more right-wing fascistic parties and movements growing and emerging. We're kind of lost the plot in a sense with the Soviet Union, that one of the greatest successes beyond just the socialist economy was that all these people that have been really had their bayonets pointed at each other because of Tsarism and feudalism were now brought together for the socialist project. And I can't really think of another movement that's achieved such success in that kind of realm.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such a great answer to this. And as Camila was saying, so many unique answers to this that I really appreciate that perspective. Um, Isabel, what are your thoughts on this? Well, let me repeat the question for you since you just got back from a major coffee spill involving a cat. um, what are the most important lessons of the 20th century revolutions that the movement needs to reckon with today for success?
Oh yeah, great question. I think I'm sure other people have said this or will say this, but um, the ideological waverings or um, uh, I guess the willingness to reconsider the principles when that isn't the right move. So my point here being that we need to, in the movements that we build, stay very firm in our principles, in those core lessons that Marxism-Leninism teaches us, um, and not waver on those, not be afraid to stay firm on those principles. We have seen time and time again how revisionism is one of the major factors at play when we look at the downfall of communist movements across the world. So being firmly anti-revisionist, not allowing any of our core principles to be obscured or replaced at any point in our practical organizing is hugely important. And we shouldn't be afraid to speak on what our issues are with the various revisionist tendencies and point to how those revisionist tendencies can lead to failures in our movement. So in the US in particular, I think we can look at how the communist movement in the US was very strong for a decent amount of time as well, which was very supported by the success of the Russian Revolution and the existence of the Soviet Union and how much the Soviet Union was able to achieve. It was very inspiring for the American working class. But the mistakes of the American communist movement, the revisionist trends that won out at the end of the day, are things that we need to be studying very practically what happened, and how to avoid those same errors. So those are, I think, the lessons from the American communist movement are things that I'm personally very interested in studying. I think this question might be geared more towards like the successful socialist revolutions that did take place, and what we can learn from them, which is an infinite amount as well. But for our work here, my job in the APL,
Right.
I look a lot at what was successful in the early organizing of like the Communist Party of the USA, and how Browderism gutted that organization. Happy to talk more about that if we want to, but that's my answer.
Nice. Yeah, Sebastian.
Yeah, I take for granted sometimes how in sync our leadership is on a lot of questions.
Right.
But I if I think everything Isabel said is perfectly accurate. I'll try to enhance that, but I think the most important lessons for us from the 20th century are it's I'm going to say like a two-part thing, right? Maybe, I mean, there's more than that, but the main things: how to win and how to lose. And for that second part, the latter part, is how to recognize and like recover from devastating losses.
Right.
The forces of revolution in America, around the world, are built into the system of exploiters and exploited. And I remember reading, I want to say it was Stalin, maybe Lenin. It was Lenin. The sole fighting unit of the proletariat is the worker, and understanding. I'm done with my quote, but understanding that these fighters will not ever go away until the bitter end. But their victory is only assured through being guided by Marxism-Leninism. I do have more to say about the losses here. A lot of people make a lot of mistakes, I think, in the 21st century and I think it was kind of touched on by other people. But trying to move away from Marxism-Leninism, thinking that they'll have better results. The thing is that move away from Marxism-Leninism has been around since the creation of Marxism-Leninism, and it's
For
always been
real.
a failure. Yeah. A lot of people, there's a lot of conversations. I sometimes I'll go to like DSA meetings and stuff. A lot of conversations that I really don't think people realize these are conversations that have already been had 100 years ago. A lot of, and also have been tried and tested. I really do think that some of these ideas, the failure is already built in, and it really is just the exposure. A lot of people have, they see the end of the Soviet Union as being a permission to just have a free for all. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And sometimes they'll go one way or the other. They'll lean into these kind of cults of personalities and leadership from people who seem very confident in what they're doing, and they'll sort of let themselves be taken with that current, just robots. And on the other hand, you have people who are like, well, actually, we don't need a party, or, as Stalin would put it, like the most advanced detachment, the most advanced workers' organization, in which all other organizations kind of find their strategic positioning around.
Right.
They see that, like, they're trying to compensate the other way, where they live in this fantasy world where they can either elect the fascism away, or they can just like rely on no guidance, no theory to kind of achieve their aims. I do want to read something I pulled up here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Specifically for this question, from our partners in the DR, particularly Manuel Salazar. in his book October 17th. There's no English translation, so I just kind of quickly translated it. I'll start with the longer part, and this is from again Manuel Salazar. It's worth emphasizing because it often happens that we believe that triumphant revolutions happen only on days in which they occur. In 10, for example, that of October 1917, and we do not value the process by which that moment has reached its proper dimension. Revolutions are built day by day. They are the result of sustained work that leads to decades of revolutionary struggle, and work being condensed. Work being condensed in a few days and even a single day. And what that is that, again, I think it's important to look at the timeline. And a lot of people want results today. They want results now. So they'll try to join an organization, and then they'll get really, really discontent with the organization. And a lot of times that organization does have bad leadership, to be fair. But I do see the other side of that coin where people are like, it has to happen. We have to take action. I'm an action guy. I'm a soldier. Whatever. Those people are doomed to failure. It really is building out our networks, building out our connection, our real connection to workers and their organizations, demonstrating our authenticity, and really our, again, to at the risk of sounding corporate, our pathway to success.
No, we sound like PSL now.
Right. there is a lot of administration and sort of day-to-day work that needs to be done. We have to have a functional organization, but that doesn't mean that we're waiting by the sidelines, waiting for someone else to spark a fire. No. We have to know when that's going to happen, when we decide to strategically spark those fires, based on the positioning of the worker and also the positioning of the exploited classes. How in disunity are they? When can we take advantage of their disunity? Where I think Camilo said, finding the cracks in their foundation. But yeah, that's it. Sorry, that was so long-winded. No. I always an opportunity to quote Manuel Salazar. He's a really, really intelligent guy.
Period. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Victor.
What are the most important lessons from 20th century socialist experiments? Well, as has already been shown by other people's answers, there's a lot to talk about here, but I would say some of the major ideas, aside from what folks have already said, is that one thing is that a revolution doesn't just end with the seizure of power. That's only the beginning of a new phase of class struggle, because even after a successful socialist revolution that expropriates the bourgeoisie and puts in the dictatorship of the proletariat, remnants of the old bourgeoisie and new privileged strata still exist. The old ideas still persist. Nationalism still persists. So does careerism. So does technocratic sort of ideas, you might say. And there is a danger, as happened in the former USSR and also in China. The state itself can be a vehicle for new elites or a new capitalist class to emerge. So that's why Lenin emphasized that the dictatorship of the proletariat is a prolonged struggle and not a transition that quickly moves past. But one core warning is that the Soviet Union, contrary to worries, didn't revert to capitalism through invasion or through violent counter-revolution. It did so through internal political degeneration at the top, which allowed figures like Nikita Khrushchev to emerge and to do things like reframe the class struggle as over, to promote peaceful coexistence, to expand market mechanisms and autonomy of enterprises in what used to be a centrally controlled state. all of this led to capitalist restoration through revisionist ideology, not through world war or violent counter-revolution. So your biggest threat isn't always people outside. It's also your internal complacency or ideological decay inside. And another lesson I would say is that to remember that economic policy also reflects class interests, because a lot of times, and this happens with modern day leftists too, they get caught up in the socialist symbols and names of places like Russia or China, or even some parties in the USA, and they take it at face value. But when socialist states do things like reintroduce profit incentives or decentralization policies that favor enterprise managers or uphold market efficiency as some sort of guiding principle for production, it should be obvious that they're shifting power away from the proletariat. So we've emphasized over and over in this discussion that ideology is not secondary, it's decisive. And the 20th century history definitely upholds that.
Right.
Because a revisionism succeeded precisely because Marxism was diluted or reinterpreted. Party members lost clarity on these issues of class struggle, and opportunism and careerism was tolerated uh, in the name of unity or in the name of pragmatism or in the name of supporting the leading socialist state. So that's why people like Enver Hoxha, emphasize continuous ideological education on the inside and sharp struggle against incorrect lines, and knowing the difference between something you can compromise on and fundamentals of the ideology. International pressure and external pressure certainly matter, but one thing is it's not decisive without internal weakness. Socialist states of the 20th century faced outright military invasion. They faced blockades. They faced sanctions. They faced military threats. They
Right.
faced CIA-backed rebellions. They faced capitalist encirclement. They faced all of this. But those pressures only succeeded in defeating them when internal ideological and political disunity let them, that had already eroded it. So a revisionist country can collapse even without direct confrontation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what makes revisionism so dangerous, because it's subtle, incremental, and often justified as necessary adjustment to modern conditions. So I would say some of the biggest lessons of the 20th century's socialist experiments would be, and some of the things that the movement today has to reckon with. We don't just need to build the revolution, we need to prevent degeneration after victory. We need to ensure the party remains proletarian in character, and we need to keep the class struggle alive under socialism.
No, exactly. And something I think about with what you were saying is the Dungist tradition of enrich yourself. You know, like that concept of enrich yourself. You know, what do you have to
Yes.
say about that? Yeah.
To get rich is glorious.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that should have been. I don't know why more people haven't looked at that and been like, nah, I don't know about that. But yeah, we are getting to time here. I don't want to keep anybody over the allotted time. So we're going to go ahead and Maurice, thank you so much for writing up these amazing questions. We're going to skip to question 8. Is the US on the precipice to revolution or a revolutionary upsurge? Question mark. I would let's just jump right into it. Camilo, what is your read on that?
Maybe.
Question mark.
Who knows? Okay, this question comes up quite often, and even our own comrades will ask this, and I always have like a two-pronged response to that. And one of them is to say no one can predict the future. No one in 1787 predicted the French Revolution. They looked at France and they saw a powerful country with profitable colonies, a strong military, tremendous cultural and social achievements. Yeah, there was a little discontent here. Yeah, the monarchy's creaking along a little bit, but yeah, nothing we haven't seen before. No one predicted what was going to happen 2 years later when it all exploded. By the same token, in 1915, Lenin himself, now this is 1915, mind you, Lenin himself gave a speech at a world conference of socialist youth in Switzerland. And he started off his speech by saying, "We of the older generation will not live to see the revolution, but you younger comrades."
Wow. Yeah, it really ate his words
Yeah,
2 years
yeah.
later.
2 years later. So no one can predict the future. And then the second part of that, my second response to that is the revolution's here. The revolution's already happened. Class struggle is revolution. Pardon me. Every meeting that we go to, every demonstration we participate in, every issue of the Red Phoenix we put out, every coalition we are part of, every struggle we've joined, that's part of the revolutionary process. It's ongoing. It's here. It's happening. The question is, when are the balance of forces going to be tipped? And then it becomes incumbent on us to realize that moment. Now is the time to strike. But the revolution itself, it's ongoing. Class struggle is revolution.
Yeah, I think that's such a good answer, and I really appreciate, it's the concept of revolution as having a start and an end point. I don't think is a great way to look at it, and I really appreciate, the nuance that you bring to that, Camilo. And Maurice, any comments on that?
Not really. I think my main inspiration, well, for most of these questions, is just questions I've heard a lot over the years, and I'm sure,
Right.
I mean, other comrades have also shared those sentiments. But a question
Yeah.
like this comes up, I feel like a lot, just impatience, reasonable impatience, like justified um, anxiety about the conditions. Like, oh, when are we going to have this revolution? Because, the sense of doomerism, the sense of dread that's kind of been hanging over the news cycle the past few years. I feel like it has people in a now or never. But just like Comrade said, revolutions, no one can predict them, and they're based on mass movements. So it's really a matter of, again, as Comrade said, the when the forces will change in the favor of the working class. But I feel as though something is happening. We're definitely seeing there's too many contradictions coming to a head for something. We're in the midst of something historic. I mean,
Right.
every week, every month. I mean, the first 3-4 months of this year have been astoundingly head spinning. From Venezuela to Iran to what's going on and has been going on for years in Palestine, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel as though we're definitely in the midst of something, but that is no reason to become complacent, of course. And the
Right.
fact that we do see things changing just means that we have to work harder.
Yeah. No, I think that's very well put, Comrade. Isabel, any comments?
Yeah, I'm kind of confused. I thought we all knew the revolution was next month.
Oh, I forgot to put it in the Google Calendar. I'm sorry.
It's in my day
May
planner.
1st.
Got it in my day planner.
My bad.
May 1st. I thought
May 1st.
the revolution was happening May 1st this year. Well, exactly what Camilo said about like this is an ongoing revolutionary process, including the work of next month. Every single thing that we do, every meeting you attend, every time you show up to a meeting and are prepared and ready to be the note taker in the meeting or whatever your role is, it's part of the revolutionary struggle, an ongoing process. And we cannot say, the date of the revolution. And even if we could, that wouldn't be any sort of excuse or anything, any sort of impetus for the content of our work to change. We know through the study of Marxism-Leninism that we are on the right path in the work that we do. We're guided by a theory and a history of practice that we know to be successful. So it's time to just put our heads down and do the work. When I get asked this question, Maurice, you're right, these are all questions that come up for, I think, APO leadership a lot. And I get asked this question, I like to redirect to if the person I'm talking to who's asking me this question is willing to put in the work to be a revolutionary and to be part of that revolutionary struggle. Because if the answer to that question is no, then why are we having the conversation to begin
Right.
with? So the more kind of important question that I'd send back to people is, what are you willing to do to be part of the revolutionary movement? And are you willing to kind of commit yourself to being a revolutionary in all the work that you do? Because it's not just a clock in to your Leninism shift, clock out of your Leninism shift.
Me clocking into my
This is
Leninism shift.
this is something that you do all the time, and all of the work that you do in your workplace, in your conversations with friends. You're always a kind of fighter in the class war, basically, and always contributing to that ongoing revolutionary movement. So the more important thing is, if everybody is contributing to building a revolutionary movement, then we can actually bring that process along, which is our kind of historic task
Right.
as the proletariat.
You know.
But yeah, so I would not give any sort of date to when a revolution is going to happen, or if we're in the
The
like
revolutionary
part
moment.
of the struggle right now that's going
Right.
to lead to a revolution sooner rather than later. Um, that is not a question I think any individual can answer. That's up to
Right.
us as organizers of the proletarian class movement.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Sebastian and Victor, you guys are the last ones up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, I think everyone who spoke, again, I can't disagree with them. They're right. But I do think that when it comes to like really recognizing a real push towards uh, the kind of permanence of the gains of such a revolution, because we have moments all the time where things feel like, oh wow, they're going to change really soon, or a lot of people are angry and they're all showing up into the streets, and like that's true. um, but we can't advance forward without having ground that we can defend. And the only way we're going to do that is with the leadership of a Marxist Leninist party, and with guided by Marxism Leninism, genuinely looking at the class struggle for what it is. Um, and I think the dictatorship of the proletariat, the establishment of that first and foremost, a new kind of democracy, a new kind of governance, is going to be the vessel to the main, I guess, like defensive barrier to protect the revolution from the exploitative forces of society. So of the world, really, right?
Right.
Society.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I think that's it. I think again, I can't say anything different than what my colleagues have said. They're all correct. Um, but yeah, if I was going to enhance that in any way, it would be that.
Awesome. Yeah. Victor, you're the last up.
Okay, so this is an important question. My short answer to the main question is the United States in a revolutionary situation as defined by Vladimir Lenin. Bluntly, the answer would be no. However, I do think we are trending in that direction, and it's worth unpacking why. Because Lenin's definition of a revolutionary upsurge is often quoted loosely and sometimes even intentionally misapplied. So when Lenin spoke of a revolutionary situation like what we saw in 1917, it wasn't just because people were angry or there were protests. He outlined that first there needed to be a crisis among the ruling class. So what we want to look for is the bourgeoisie can no longer rule in the old way, and there are really deep fractures at the top. And he also outlined intensified suffering and discontent among the common people. So ordinary life just becomes completely unmanageable. And then the third one, and the one that's the most overlooked, would be a significant rise in independent mass political activity. In other words, people moving beyond passivity into sustained and organizing and often illegal struggle. And implicitly, in Lenin's ideology, for a revolution to actually happen, there needs to be a revolutionary party capable of leading and seizing power. So we go through these criteria here and we ask ourselves, first of all, is there a ruling class crisis in the US right now? There are very deep contradictions, and they are getting worse. There's extreme polarization between political factions. There's an increasing movement to the right and an open embrace of violence. There's a lot of institutional gridlock and failure. There are enormous conflicts within the bourgeoisie over strategy. But I wouldn't say there's a crisis of rule yet, because the US ruling class still governs pretty effectively through elections, through institutions, through courts, and through bureaucracy, and is increasingly relying on a military apparatus to keep control. They haven't outright split into factions yet, although it is looking like that might happen. Whereas in pre-1917 Russia, the state was breaking down completely due to war pressure. That level of crisis is not yet present in the United States. Are the masses unable to live in the old way? Again, there's enormous contradictions. There's rising inequality, there's rising cost of living, there's lack of housing, there's debt burdens, there's lots of healthcare stress. But most people are still living within the system and expecting some type of reform or improvement. We're not yet at a breaking point where daily life is just completely unmanageable. Although things are definitely bad, but we've not yet crossed a line where the old way of living is completely impossible for millions. Now, the independent political activity criteria. There have been enormous increase in protests, particularly since 2020. There have been increasing labor actions in certain sectors. There have been waves of activism. I wouldn't say these have been as sustained and unified as a pre-1917 type situation. A lot of them have unfortunately been channeled successfully into electoral sort of operations. Although things like the No Kings protests are certainly positive signs of increasing awareness and political agitation, they have also been able to be channeled successfully through the steam valves of capitalism, for lack of a better term. So much of this activity is progressive, but still within bourgeois limits, not really a rupture with the old system. And is there a revolutionary party capable of leading right now? Currently, although we're working on it, there's no mass disciplined Marxist-Leninist party with deep roots in the working class nationwide. That is what we're working on building right here. So from this perspective, the US is in a phase of intensifying contradictions. It's in a phase of instability and soon recession. And it's in a process of fascization at the top and increasing open embrace of violence and corruption. But I would say it's not a qualitative break into a revolutionary situation yet. I would say it's more likely we're in a pre-revolutionary or preparatory period where conditions are developing, but not yet decisive. I think, though, that a deeper rupture in the ruling class, a sharper decline in living conditions, more sustained mass action, and a credible revolutionary leadership are all likely in the near future.
Right. Yeah. No, Sebastian, do you have something to say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, can you like edit it to where it sounds like I said that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Victor. Yeah, no, I think those were all really great responses, and I appreciate everybody's presence here today, answering these questions. Even though this is the last episode of the Liberation Hour, this is not the last that you'll be seeing of us. We are moving over to the Red Phoenix News Network. Maurice, is it okay that I share that out loud now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't I just want to make sure we are moving over officially to the Red Phoenix News Network, which is the brand new audiovisual arm of the Red Phoenix newspaper, which is when was the RP founded?
I want to say 2008, 2009.
Yeah. So we are going to be the audiovisual wing of that now. And so I will be moving over there for my content. It will not be on my page, Communist Bananas. That's my personal page. It'll be moved over to the Red Phoenix a YouTube page, which is where we will be putting all of our live content, all of our pre-recorded content. We have a lot of really great plans that I'm very excited for, that Maurice and I have been working very diligently on in the background. So, once again, thank you everyone for being here. This I think, was a really great final episode of the show and a great way to round it all out. It's been a ride, that's for sure, but I'm so excited to continue this work in a more official capacity for the party. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Any closing words before we finish up from anyone?
APL wants you.
Yes, APL wants you. Sebastian, comments?
Yeah, I would just say thank you, Felicity, for doing this work, putting this all together. Your shows have been very enjoyable and very helpful.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. You guys, everyone here is so accomplished and wonderful, and I am so excited to continue this work with you all in the next phase. And so, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.